He was dubbed the most dangerous man in the world, and that wasn't even a Vince McMahon line. That's the title he was given before he got into the wrestling business. Ken Shamrock tends to be overlooked now, maybe because of his short stay in the WWF, but he was a key member of Attitude Era Wrestling. He had a great run, but it was short, and once it was over, it was basically over for good. On today's show, we seek to keep him in the fold and turn a blink and it's gone career into an all-time great run. Well, welcome to Rebooking the Territory. This is your host, Luke Thayer. So happy to have you join us again this week. And I have a special guest, a wonderful new guest. We've had a few repeats recently, but this is a new guest, and I actually got to meet him for the first time. He's actually the host of the YouTube web series, Drive-Thru Reviews with Drew and Laura, and the Nickel and Dime Football Show. He has also been in multiple comedy festivals around the country and the world. I'd like to welcome to the show a wonderful stand-up comedian, Drew Harrison. How are you doing, Drew?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Oh, wonderful. I am so happy to find other wrestling fans that I don't know, especially in the comedy world, because comedy can be a tight-knit community, but it also can be, there's so many comedians out there that you don't get to meet everybody, especially this past year. We haven't been traveling around, so you don't get some of those festivals. You don't get those extra relationship building events. Agreed. So it's good to meet you for the first time.
Yeah, man.
Have you on the show?
I love the idea of this. This is fantastic.
It's a fun thing.
Yeah, because we've all had that, like, I could have written that better. You know, like you're giving the wrestling fans that opportunity to be like, I had strong opinions about this.
Yeah, and I feel like we've all been doing it in the back of a green room anyway, so we might as well do it on a podcast. Obviously people are going to disagree with us because that's the way this works. It's wrestling. And we, of course, all have very strong opinions about what was supposed to be done, especially with our favorite wrestlers and storylines and promotions. We get all of that. So this week, we're going to be covering kind of a early Attitude Era guy in Ken Shamrock. But, before we get quite into what we're going to be rebooking, do you have any personal connection with Ken Shamrock? I don't know your actually wrestling history. Mine, I grew up a WWF kid, kind of got into WCW a little bit into my early childhood, but after WWF, Hulk Hogan type of guy. But what about you?
I think we're on probably along the same timeline. Grew up a Hogan, Ultimate Warrior, Macho Man, Jake the Snake, Undertaker kid. Like 1990 is when I started. I was 5. That's when I started. Remembering watching it. That's back when it's back when wrestling was on Saturday mornings.
Yes.
And I loved it. And then, as a WWF kid through, when Shawn Michaels and I was a huge Shawn Michaels fan. And then when Stone Cold took the reins and threw the Rock, and this is perfect that you picked Ken Shamrock, because this is the time when I think I probably loved wrestling the most. Like I leaned a little more towards WCW. Like I loved the NWO.
You got the NWO shirt.
Yeah.
Now, I kind of assumed that was the Shawn Michaels version of the NWO shirt that you were wearing.
It's the original. No qualms with the Shawn Michaels version, but although, strong opinions about that too. Like you said, strong opinions and wrestling fan. But yeah, I loved the Monday Night Wars. I loved, the Ministry of Darkness, which we'll touch on when we start talking about Ken Shamrock. This was when I stopped watching wrestling in probably like 2000, from like 2000 to 2010. So this is perfect. This is when I was like at the height about to give it up, because it wasn't, it kind of got bad in the early 2000s, when WCW wasn't pushing WWF anymore. I feel like I lost touch with it. I didn't care about the invasion or anything like that. So there's a big gap where I didn't watch it. And I've recently, through my brother, who used to pick on me. He used to pick on me for watching wrestling, but now he watches it incessantly. And so he's gotten me back into it. And I love it like I did as a kid.
That's funny. You were not into the ruthless aggression.
Nah, I missed all
John
that.
Cena.
Yeah, I'm going back and watching all that because there are some great matches and some great. I'm a sucker for a good storyline. You know what I mean? Like, I love the matches. The matches have to be good. They have to back it up. But give me a good storyline, and you got me hooked.
Yeah, and that's what wrestling is supposed to be at its heart, is really about storylines. And I don't care if you go back to Frank Gotch. It's about storylines in the ring, about telling a story to that audience. I've said this many times on the podcast that I think that pro wrestling and stand-up comedy are two of the most relatable and related forms of entertainment that exist, because stand-up comedy is so different than a movie or a television show. But and so is pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is a television show, but and as stand-up comedy can be a television show, but in the cases of those things, you are watching stand-up comedy. You're watching a live performance of wrestling, and it's a taped version of that. Yeah. Whereas it's still in front of a live audience that you're watching the taping of, and we live a very, very similar type of life, but even on stage, we're trying to tell stories as comedians, essentially. Even if you're not a storyteller, you're trying not to bomb. You're trying to get a reaction from the audience, as are those performers in the ring. And so when we say that, to go back and look at some of these storylines, like I was big into the Attitude Era as well. Love WCW. This is another thing I've said on the podcast, probably too much, is how much I loved Hulk Hogan, and as a babyface and as a heel, I didn't care.
It sparked it because I completely I didn't. Out of all the things that WCW I feel was doing pretty good in the mid '90s, I didn't really care about Hogan. He like the Dungeon of Doom, Kevin Sullivan stuff, completely lost my attention altogether. And then he flips and turns heel and is the leader of this crazy new organization. Hooked immediately again. Yeah.
Now, to be fair, I don't know that I've ever met anyone that was into Kevin Sullivan. Like, and that's not to rip on him as a performer or anything. It's just, by the time I was watching, he was just short and round and bald and not scary, but he was still like trying
so hard.
Yeah. The devil worship type of thing that he'd been doing for a long time. And it just didn't click with, I think, our generation. It just kind of like, it felt hokey.
It did. They turned Earthquake into Shark. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, we saw all these guys that we grew up on that were legit and scary in WWF. And then they brought them over and wrapped them in toilet paper and called them the Mummy. Like it was terrible.
Yes, absolutely. It's, even just thinking about the Shark, it almost gives me a headache how they can mess up things so badly. And it's unfortunate because someone like the Earthquake, and that is somebody who I'm going to have to go back and rebook at some point in WCW, because they had an opportunity to do something with him and they didn't. They did this kind of with Brutus the Barber Beefcake. He had multiple different versions of himself, the Booty Man, and where you just, and I actually think a very good version of him could have been the Disciple.
Oh yeah. I love that. The way that was headed, but
yes, exactly. And, and maybe we don't know about his physical condition at that point, but in terms of his look, he was in the best shape of his life. Yeah. Oh, he was the best shape of his life. He had a great look. He should have been able to have done something. And it's kind of like, he's literally a guy that's almost part of the audience. That's how far in the background of the NWO he was.
He's a foot soldier. He's the first one to get knocked out by the face that's fighting the NWO at that time. It's like, go get in that ring and get knocked out real quick. Why Hogan and Nash stand back and look scared,
Exactly. It was a paycheck. I get it.
Yeah.
Beefcake needed the paycheck, but man, he was in such phenomenal shape that almost no one I knew, including myself, knew that was Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yeah.
He had fully transformed himself, and it was a great opportunity for something new. Now, unfortunately, that's not who we're rebooking today. So we're actually going to be talking about Ken Shamrock, and Ken Shamrock specifically. One of my earliest memories with Ken Shamrock is a friend of mine had a Ken Shamrock Jakks Pacific toy, like one of the action figures. Yeah. And just how jacked that action figure looked. And then seeing him on an episode of Raw, probably, because I know that he was the special guest referee for Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold, or was that correct? No, not Shawn Michaels, Stone Cold, but the Stone Cold Bret Hart. And that
had the sleeves ripped off the ref shirt.
Sleeves ripped off, and he had enormous arms. Like even going back and looking at some of the pictures of him, he was in good shape, and he had a very interesting chest. It was almost like square pectorals, which you didn't see a lot of, and strong back, but his arms were just enormous. They look like the arms that Hogan almost had, just on a much smaller, compact version of a guy.
What I loved about him right from the get-go is he was believable. You know what I mean? His finisher, because we've seen it time and time again, being long-term fans. They debut this guy who's supposed to be scary, and then his finisher is terrible.
Yeah,
he had a finisher that you thought he was going to rip the guy's leg off and beat him with it. He was so believable when he first came out.
Absolutely. Well, I think he's he has to be probably the earliest version of this, although maybe there's other people that kind of dabbled in pro wrestling or got in there, like maybe a Dan Severn a little bit before him. But the MMA guys.
Yeah.
MMA was so new in the mid 90s. We
didn't know how to take it,
Yeah, we didn't know how to take it exactly. And we didn't know fully what it was. I remember even being in college, and this is, probably ruthless aggression era.
Yeah.
Even, and hearing a guy at the gym he just called himself a cage fighter, or a bar fighter. And they weren't even using the term MMA fully yet. Like, it was kind of
but you're just a fighter, dude. You just fight other human beings.
Yeah. And I even recently heard an interview about some mixed martial arts, the early days of the UFC. Mixed martial arts didn't mean each individual had learned mixed martial arts. It meant that the people competing against each other had different martial arts backgrounds. So one guy might be a wrestler, and one might be jiu-jitsu, and one guy might be judo, but they weren't all learning all of the different versions.
It's crazy to me. There's little kids nowadays that are growing up to be MMA fighters. Yes. They're in mixed martial. There's not, hey, put Tommy in karate. No, he's training to be a killer.
Yeah. And they will take you down at the park if you run into one of these kids.
Right.
Yeah. That's something growing up, we didn't have to deal with.
Right.
You
he's a little MMA fighter. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
You didn't have to worry about getting in a triangle in the playground. Yeah. Now they're going to have to worry about that. And so he brought, when you say realism, I think he brought in a realism that some of those that had gotten a little bit lost in wrestling. It's not that it had never been there. I mentioned Frank Gotch earlier. That's a guy who brought realism to it. To Vern Gagne's a guy that brought realism, a real big time wrestler. And this is just prior to Kurt Angle coming in, or right around that time. I think Shamrock was in slightly before him. Yeah. And you're starting to see different real guys, not guys, not this is not to take anything away from Stone Cold or Shawn Michaels, but in terms of actual fighting background, they didn't have any.
Right.
They came, Stone Cold
fighting Marines at the bar after.
Right. Well, getting beat up by Marines.
Yeah.
I don't know that he fought them.
You're right.
So their brilliance came in something else. Shawn Michaels' brilliance came into
his selling,
performance in the ring, making you believe everything that's happening in there, storytelling. Bret Hart's great at this too. And Stone Cold comes from a football background. He played football in college. And that's not to say that other people didn't. I think like Terry Funk, was a football guy. $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase was a football guy. It's not that you can't have been a football guy. But Ken Shamrock himself, we had just seen him win. I know he didn't win every UFC fight he had been in before that, but he had won most. In the moniker, the most dangerous man in the world.
So scary.
It's scary, and it's not a WWF/E creation. That was something he came in with that ABC News, I think, had given him.
Yeah.
They had done a special, almost like a 2020 type of thing, on who's the scariest individual in the world. And it's this guy. So he's coming in that way.
Right.
And it's actually surprising that when you bring realism into a cartoonish world, it can threaten that cartoonish world. Right. So if you have him versus Duke the Dumpster Drosy, or whatever,
he's going to murder Duke.
It's going to murder him. And it's going to feel very odd, very at odds. And yet he can go in the ring with The Rock, and instead of it feeling that The Rock is fake, he can elevate The Rock to make it feel like the whole thing is real.
Yeah, I agree with you for sure.
Yeah, so it's that,
because that was I think that's when early on, that's when they got the best out of him. You know what I mean? Like, because he came in after being that referee, which was nice because I think a few people at the time were like, oh, they got a real guy to be a referee at WrestleMania. This is what they do. Mm-hmm. Then he came over and started wrestling. He and then feuded. I remember the feuding with The Rock and the Nation of Domination for that Intercontinental belt, and I felt like he got some great moments out of Rock early on with that. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, he's one of those guys where I look at it and I go, just to be clear, he had a very short run.
Yes.
There. He was basically there from, I think he came in, I think that even that original match might have been early 97.
Yes. 97.
And then he's gone by like 99.
Right.
And so he's there maybe two years. I don't even know full 2 years, but that's about how long he's there. And all of the memorable things about him happened in that short time. He's not a guy that came back. He did wrestle a little bit here and there, and some other things, but not long. He's kind of dabbles.
He makes little appearances here.
Right. And he's kind of an overlooked and forgotten guy in wrestling.
Yeah.
I think when he gets brought up, everybody that saw him goes, oh, yeah, that dude was a beast. He was scary. He felt real. But I don't think he's the guy that comes to people's minds. And
I think stuff he did after wrestling kind of hurt how people felt about him as well. I think the Tito Ortiz stuff kind of turned me off to him. I'm not going to lie.
He did a lot of stuff in MMA, that afterwards, and this is, I'm not throwing any shade his way when I say this, but I don't think they drug tested for anything in the early days of UFC. And whether or not he was involved in,
I'm sure they were kind of hoping the guys were anyway,
whether he was in performance enhancing or he's just taking his vitamins, I don't know. Yeah. But when he comes back to MMA afterwards, I think there was a regime change. There was now more, not that they've ever been completely free of scandal there, but his body was a little different. He also was getting older, and then he just kept fighting too. So I think seeing Ken Shamrock, the most dangerous man in the world, can't have a 500 record.
Right.
Or just lose his last 10 fights. It's
right.
You're not the most dangerous man in the world anymore.
There was a reason. Yeah. I was about to say, there's a reason they stopped using that when they talked about it, for sure. And I think even looking back, I envision a different timeline for this guy, where I think even his MMA version, the version of him, and the WWE/F version of him, both are enhanced
by him leaving the MMA behind, keeping that mystique, and then having a longer, more interesting career in that wrestling world.
I agree.
And so as we're starting to get into just even rebooking this thing, obviously those first 2 years are so good.
I was about to say, looking on paper, they did the right things with it.
And it seems almost unnecessary. A lot of times this feels like on the show that we're going back and, we're not questioning the writing ability or the booking ability of the people doing it, because
sometimes.
Well, sometimes there's some obvious things where you go, I don't know why it's indefensible. But then there's a lot of times where it's like, look, injury or somebody behind the scenes or whatever creates a situation where
they dug themselves a hole.
There's all sorts of different reasons why they can't move forward with what everybody wants. But this is one case where I don't think the writing was the issue.
Not at all.
It's just he's gone.
Yeah. I think they let him down. If I have any gripes, because we're seeing eye to eye on this completely, because I don't think you touched those first few years he was there because you built him up perfectly. I think if they would have kept him a little more into it towards the end, I feel like they did let him down a little bit there at the end of his run with the writing.
Yeah, certainly everything where he's like winning the King of the Ring, all of this different stuff is great. And even the corporation version of him.
Yeah. Because it lays roots with Mr. McMahon.
Yes.
Like now you've always got that storyline to play off of.
Right. And it's not something where I can even say that doesn't make sense, because it does. Like, certainly in some ways, obviously they weren't doing the corporation when he first came in, but he could have been bought by Mr. McMahon immediately as an
prize
enforcer.
Fighter. It's right. It's perfect.
Right. But since he didn't come in it's okay. But, then he's starting to get into towards the very end. It felt like instead of still going up, he kind of plateaued a little bit.
He turned into, I feel like, especially the stuff with, because I loved the ministry stuff. I loved look at the names that he was in the union with, Big Show, Mankind, Test, like they're the ones that ended the ministry, they defeated the ministry. I think that was great, but I think with the Blackman stuff and the Lions Den matches I think he turned into almost a little bit of a sideshow.
Yeah. And obviously that can end up happening to somebody, especially in this era. Like a similar type of parallel to turning into a sideshow was Goldust, who had a very strong character. And then at some point you just go, what is even happening here?
When we started like chomping at people.
Yeah. It's just like, we've gone so off the rails with this thing that it's hard to then re-guide the ship back into a straight line. And so for this, I almost, at least from my point of view, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this and where you would want to go with it. But I will just give you my gut instinct here is keeping things very similar, but just not letting him leave, which for me means he's going to need a title run, like for the world championship right there at the end of 99 or middle of 99, early 99, somewhere in that time frame, to let him know you're, if not the top guy, you're going to, because obviously Stone Cold's still there, you're going to be one of the top guys. And we're going to invest money in you. You don't need to go somewhere else for money. We got you taken care of.
We're on the same page here. I agree. I would like to see that be a long, at the end of 99, I would like to see an extremely long intercontinental title run. This is where McMahon would have to sell long-term status to Ken Shamrock. Because I feel like over the course of 2000, I went back and looked at some of these pay-per-views and some of these main events, and he seamlessly slides into these storylines and is the top guy coming out of it. So I think a huge like he gets past Blackman in late 90, what was it, mid 1990 or 99. And then he takes over the Intercontinental, has some great runs with that, some great matches. Maybe takes out some of his Union guys, maybe, battles Mankind, or Mick Foley by then. I know he was more of a main event guy, but it was kind of crowded. So, they had the mid card could spare a couple of the top guys. And I think you just build him up as this kind of, he doesn't care if he's a good guy. He doesn't care if he's a bad guy. He just has a championship and that's his prize. And he fights for it and he just destroys anybody that comes near him.
I like a lot of that. I like that, going forward with that, there are some certain names that kind of pop out to me.
Okay.
Obviously there's Stone Cold at the top, right? Yep. So if you're working a program with Stone Cold, you're in that WWE championship level, the World Heavyweight Championship there. You're in the mix there for that constantly. If you're working with Rock, if you're working at this point, Rock, not the Intercontinental Rock of a couple years before, but the Rock of 99, Stone Cold. Those are, even to some extent, Mankind / Mick Foley. Undertaker is sort of in that mix. He's a top guy, but he's not a guy that needs the belt. So it's not necessarily happening there. But Kurt Angle is in this company now. And Kurt Angle is about to be the next couple of years. The guy. Right. And so those are some of the names that I think Ken Shamrock actually could have worked with, because there's almost two ways you can go here, which one is you start sliding down the card and he's going up against, a Christian of 99, or you're going upwards and you're fighting some of those top guys. I don't see him staying right in that middle Intercontinental level even.
No. I definitely think he has to, at the end of 99, has to move on to the upper. Like, I think I love a good tournament. You know what I mean? Like, even if he shows off his almost, he knows who he is. He knows he's a monster, and the Intercontinental title just doesn't do it for him anymore. And he just vacates it.
Mm-hmm.
So now you get 2 wins. You get Shamrock elevated to that next level to take on these top guys. And you get a lot of action for the mid-card guys fighting over this Intercontinental title.
I like that. I love tournaments.
Me too.
This is something I think maybe Jim Ross has talked about in his days in WCW. I love rankings. Like,
yes.
I would watch the WCW shows and they would have, this is early 90s. They would have rankings. So this is the number 1 contender. This is the number 5 contender. And it wasn't always necessary for the world championship. Sometimes it'd be for the TV title or something like that. But it was letting you know who is moving up the ladder and who's moving down.
Exactly.
And so I love seeing that. Now, they're probably never going to do that in wrestling again, at least to the
AEW came close.
They've got a version of it, but it feels like AEW,
it makes like wrestling. It makes no sense.
Right? It doesn't make any sense. It also feels like something that could be discarded at any moment.
Right.
I like the version that makes it feel like this is a staple here. You're going to see this week in and week out. It's not going to just disappear one week. Probably because back then they had taped, 6 weeks of Saturday shows already. So it's like, we know where we're going with this and you're going to see it. So I like that. I also love tournaments. I actually like King of the Ring as part as a pay-per-view. I hate that it's gotten devalued so much.
It's so watered down.
And also, this is a side note to our entire discussion. I hate the King version of people. Like when someone then becomes the king for the next year and they're wearing a robe and scepter. And I know they've done that with people. They did it with Harley Race, and you can't deny one of the greatest of all time. Even Macho King.
King. Yeah.
Which is to me, the only one that ever worked.
I agree. But that's because I'm a huge Macho Man fan. Maybe. Like, he's my favorite. All the kids were like, Hogan. I was like, but Macho Man's got something.
He has got something, and actually I think when I started watching wrestling, he was Macho King. So I originally just knew him as Macho King. And then he turned into Macho Man again. And I was like, well, King's better than Man. Why is he being a man?
Why did he go back?
Yeah, why is he that guy? And so it wasn't until later I saw the original version of the Macho Man and get the whole thing. Yeah. And, King Booker, it was fine. He obviously did everything he could possibly do with it, but I'm not a fan of it. But I love just the King of the Ring thing.
Yeah, just give him
a thing.
Do it yearly and give him a shot at the title.
That's all you need. Exactly.
Yeah. They overthink it too much sometimes, I feel like. Yeah,
it feels like it ends up being actually there was one other that I think kind of worked when Owen Hart was King of Hearts. I love when they can slide it into a direction you kind of see that their character's going anyway. You know what I mean? He was becoming that jealous brother character, and it just fits so perfectly with what he had going on. Yeah. And if his name wasn't Hart, it wouldn't have worked. No. Right. So it just happened to, I think the stars aligned on that one. And so I think when you say tournament, I even could see this happening right before King of the Ring, of him vacating that Intercontinental Championship. I kind of like that. I kind of like him having it and vacating it. Maybe even because I know he got injured right around this 99 time. If he got injured and you put it on him, even if you sometimes about the injuries a little bit before you tell the public, put it on him so that he can vacate it, which is almost unthought of. Like you wouldn't hear of why would we put it on him if he's going to be taken off? Well, because then he can be the champion when he leaves. You strip him of it. He doesn't lose. And then when he comes in, you can have a tournament for this thing. And then when he comes back, he can either have rightful claim to that again, kind of like the Razor Shawn type of situation, or he goes, I don't even want it. And he's moving on to something else and he hasn't lost. And, even looking at, if we look at kind of like the late 98, 99 world championship picture here, Rock and Mankind are throwing this thing back and forth all through late 98 through early 99. So it's going back and forth between these guys. And, obviously bookend that with Stone Cold. Mm-hmm. But we're seeing quite a bit of that. And I think that he could slide in with either of those guys. I think, for sure. I think you could have a Rock Mankind Ken, Rock Shamrock, thing again, flipping them around and extend the life of both of those guys, and maybe even the storyline of both those guys. If you've got, because you're just using them and abusing them, using them, abusing them. Obviously, Mankind is going to let himself be abused, and The Rock can sell like almost no one. Maybe a Shawn Michaels level of selling, and then back to Stone Cold, and Undertaker also got the championship for a couple months there in 99. To me, you don't even need the Undertaker to have it. It's one of those things where it just could be Stone Cold for a while, and then Ken Shamrock in that mix, and building to maybe a Stone Cold beating Ken Shamrock for that championship. I love it because I was thinking about it today. I would love to see Ken Shamrock kind of come up as Triple H does. You know what I mean? Like, especially when we get, cause I'm thinking more of like a slower burn a little bit, let him even do the things that he's doing in 99. You know what I mean? Let him do the union stuff and the things like that. And then I would have him, towards the end of 99, take a little bit of a break. You know what I mean? Like he just goes crazy one night on Raw or something, beats up everybody in sight. You know what I mean? Like just goes crazy. We can hear the next day that he gets suspended or something. He just disappears for a while. Then he comes back like a huge pop out of nowhere. Royal Rumble 2000 comes rolling in, enters first, number one guy out the door. Boom. Ken Shamrock's back.
Like, just kick him in the face, because this is the first pay-per-view of the new millennium. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure McMahon wanted to make a big punch in the face here. Come in, go in number one, do damage, eliminate so many people. Finally have his old Union stablemate Big Show eliminate him. Now we get Ken Shamrock versus Big Show. And then we can just build him up, because I think we could, the roots were planted when he was in the corporation. You know what I mean? The monster. Like, I think you don't ever make him look weak after that. You keep building him up as maybe, you know, the monster McMahon couldn't control, so that can come back in the storylines later on.
I like it. I like that. I like that version of the kind of a slow burn. You actually, the hook for me is anytime you say Royal Rumble. Yes. Royal Rumble's my favorite pay-per-view. Man,
I feel like we're the same fan. You're saying all the things that I feel in my heart.
I think when we received all the same stimuli from wrestling at the same exact time.
Royal Rumble are my favorite, man. I love it.
It's absolutely my favorite. I think, you know, that 92 Royal Rumble has a lot to do with that, but I love any sort of concept like that. Like, I think Pat Patterson was a genius with it. And I say genius is a bogus term that I hear thrown around way too much, whether it's in comedy, entertainment, or whatever. If somebody does something that's slightly better than average, they're a genius.
It's genius.
Yeah. But I say the Royal Rumble concept, at the very least, is a genius concept. You kind of flip a battle royal match around instead of everyone starting together in one big ring and throw them out, which I love that version too as well. You flip it and you build anticipation. Who's next? How long are they going to be in there? Oh, who gets the starting position? Oh, he's number 1. That's a tough draw. Number 30, that's an easy draw. They should be able to win every time, and seeing who can last the longest.
Yeah.
And so bringing him back, you know, maybe when he left, it probably was a little bit of mixture of injury and wanting to see his family.
Let him heal up. You know what I mean? Like, let him get his mind right.
Yeah. And I think if he took I think Ric Flair probably has said this, you take a couple days off and you're ready to get back on the road, you know, and you think when you're on the road as a comic, you probably are aware of this too, where, man, sometimes it just feels like, man, I want to be home.
Just need a recharge.
You know? And then you go and you recharge for a couple days sometimes, or maybe a couple hours, and you're like, you know what?
Let's get back out there.
Let's get back out there. So we see that. And so that Royal Rumble, that's, first of all, anybody coming in number 1, I love them going deep, and I also love them winning. Now you have him being thrown out by Big Show, but like, just anything because that tells a story,
right?
Coming in at number 13 and getting thrown out as the 6th person, it doesn't mean much to me.
No, use it. It's a great chance to juggle so many storylines and set so many roots for WrestleMania season that so many years they just missed tremendously.
For sure. Cause you know, that 2000 Royal Rumble was actually won by The Rock.
Right. And does he really need to win it?
He doesn't. That's the thing. He doesn't really need to win it. I'm okay if he does.
Right. I'm not hating it, because I do like what comes of it. You know, that 4-way elimination match at WrestleMania was in my rebooking, I've got it down to a triple threat, because I want to keep building off of that Ken Shamrock being eliminated by Big Show, because I think he needs that one feud that he looks like a monster right before he steps foot in the main event scene.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And I don't completely remember that match, but I don't remember Big Show having to be there. I know he was Shane McMahon's kind of representative, but
Big Show, and maybe this is just me, but I always still think of him, when I think of him being his most impactful, I think of him as the Giant in NWO, which I I gotta have
I agree with you.
episode that has to rebook that too, because he was in there for like a minute and then he's turning on him. It's like, nah, this guy, he needed a slower burn with that.
Yes, for sure.
And
if they could have stopped members at him, that would have been great.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that would have been great. You know, maybe a 4 or 5 person member of the.
That's all you needed. When you run the whole company, that's all you need.
Oh, yes. So quick side note, if you had Hall, Nash, Hogan as the main 3, and then you had Six as the guy that takes bumps for everybody and the Giant, that group is all you need. Right. And you've got.
And then throw in the Disciple with a much better run down the line.
Yes. That's it. That you got it right there. And keep Ted DiBiase out away from it. You don't need him in there.
And poor Dusty. It's the only thing Dusty ever did that I didn't like.
Dusty. Yeah. There is at some point with the NWO where you just go,
really?
Like we now have nobody in WCW. Like
everyone's NWO.
Literally now it's NWO versus NWO.
When they started getting referees and stuff, I was like, all right.
Yeah. It was much. It was a little much. So I actually, even that, you know, I don't want to linger on the Royal Rumble for too long, but as I look at like the order of it, just look at the first 3 people in that 2000 Royal Rumble: D'Lo Brown, Grandmaster Sexay, and Mosh. And I probably would keep D'Lo Brown in there, but I like
imagine Ken destroying all of them.
Yeah, he bumped them all down because shortly after that you're going to have Scotty 2 Hotty in there.
Yeah, but look at number 7.
Yeah, you've got Steve Blackman in there.
So then he finally gets past that road bump. You know what I mean?
That certainly there are some guys, and out of everybody here, I'm probably going to take Bob Backlund out of the Royal Rumble completely.
That's fair.
Bob Backlund's a guy that never quite, he's before my time originally. And then I saw the heel version of him versus Bret Hart, but wrestling had changed so much.
God, I hated that so much.
It was just, I think for us as kids, it just didn't click with maybe it was clicking with some older fans because they knew Bob Backlund.
Yeah.
But now literally this is the year 2000 and we've got Bob Backlund. He's got to be 50 at least, I would think. By this time. And if you just look at the rest of the roster, we named a few people, but you've got like Test and Greg Gale and Edge, and you've got Val Venus and Prince Albert and Hardcore Holly. And it's like, how does Bob Backlund fit in this version of WWF?
You got the Godfather, you know what I mean?
The Godfather and Kane and the Undertaker are also in what world does Bob Backlund exist? Where Undertaker and Kane exist. Like It's 2 different realities.
Exactly. I agree with you on that.
This is obviously not a Bob Backlund episode, but I think we can bump him out, bump everyone down a spot, and then put Ken Shamrock in that first spot pretty easily.
Yes, easily. And then he can go on a streak, on a tear, just throwing guys out.
Absolutely. And you can almost keep like The Rock coming in at like 24 and Big Show coming in at 26 there at the end, because you think, now is, kind of almost back end it, like overload the back end where a lot of these tough guys, because even at the time you've got Rock, even Billy Gunn, even though he wasn't like a top guy, he's a big dude.
Big guy. He's believable. We go back to that word.
Right. He's a believable big guy. Cause if you have Hardcore Holly, Rock, Billy Gunn, Big Show, Bradshaw, Kane, Godfather, all in there. X-Pac was the last entry, but it's like he's a bumping guy. He's not the big guy. But all of those guys would be larger human beings than Ken Shamrock. So it's almost a wall of guys that he's now having to get through at the end after maybe he decimated some of those earlier guys like Grandmaster Sexay and Mosh and Scotty 2 Hotty and maybe had a little test with Steve Blackman and but he's not going to have a hard time getting past Crash Holly.
No. No.
So those are just that, so I see him coming out of that. He comes out of that strong. Yeah. And so the next one is the next big one. I happen to be somebody who still thinks of the pay-per-views as the main ones. When we start going to No Way Out, Backlash, Insurrection, those are actually less interesting to me than episodes of Raw or SmackDown.
Because they're filler. You know what I mean? Like nothing big's going to happen. Nobody's going to change anything big. But I think if done properly, they can build a Ken Shamrock up. Because I think you take him out. He looks strong in the Royal Rumble. Big Show slightly gets the better of him. Mm-hmm. They have an altercation at No Way Out. Just tease it a little bit. You don't have to don't give us this match 4 times before WrestleMania. You know what I mean? Like tease it a little bit, build up the storyline a little bit. Then you have Ken Shamrock absolutely destroy Big Show at WrestleMania. And that turns the final match, the headline match, Triple H, Rock, Mick Foley into a triple threat. That's back when McMahon was pushing Triple H. You know what I mean? So why don't we touch into him being the hired gun again? Here comes Ken Shamrock to help Triple H retain that title at the end of the pay-per-view after decimating Big Show earlier in the night.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's funny is like, I kind of went back and I was like, cause I don't remember the No Way Out type of pay-per-view. Yeah. And so I saw Big Show defeated Rock to determine the number 1 contender to the WWF championship. It's like, why was that being the number 1 contender? Like it's always the winner of the Royal Rumble. Right. And so it's weird that it's there because I think, if you're doing that there must have been some storyline I'm forgetting about why the Royal Rumble winner wasn't. But
I think it's when the McMahons were back, like Shane had a backer, Stephanie was backing somebody, and Vince was backing somebody. It was the McMahons were using these wrestlers as pawns. And I think Shane somehow got Big Show a match with The Rock for his Royal Rumble win, number 1 contender shot.
There we go.
If I'm remembering right, I'm not positive.
That makes sense. Even if it wasn't, we're going to go with it here, and somebody can correct us on Twitter in the actuallys. But I could see that being. I actually kind of like an interference involvement.
Love it.
Where at No Way Out.
Especially for heels,
Yes. Yeah. You got Ken Shamrock being involved in there in a match, or Big Show being involved in a match, and one of the other gets involved there. And then the next pay-per-view is WrestleMania, in which we had the fatal 4-way between Triple H, Rock, Mick Foley, Big Show. I'm not into that.
No.
I mean, it's great.
Glad we're on the same page with that.
Absolutely great lineup, obviously, but I'm not into whatever
that's just a hodgepodge. You know what I mean? Like your biggest championship, you got to have 4 people.
Yes. It's, I feel like anytime we have 3 ways or 4 ways, or it's a 4-way, honestly, that's
crazy.
Almost a Royal Rumble match. Like very rarely do you have 10 guys in the ring at Royal Rumble. You'd have it for a few minutes and you got to scale it back a little bit. 4 guys in a ring is so close to Battle Royal that I'm like, I don't know what we're doing there. And it ends up being, you've got two guys that have to pretend that they were knocked out for minutes at a time and just lay on the outside of the ring.
Yeah. We forgot about him. He's still in it.
Yeah. Which I like that in small doses. And I like it if it's appropriate. Like somebody was just hit in the head with a sledgehammer. Well, that makes sense why you would actually be laying outside. Not, he just threw him through the ropes and now he is just dead on the outside. Like, it's just the logic isn't always there. And I think that wrestling in general, we as fans are 100% okay with having the suspension of disbelief. But please make it as easy as possible for us to suspend that disbelief.
Right.
Like, don't make every match just a little help. Harder and harder. Yeah, just meet us halfway. We'll jump across the moat. Yeah. Just don't make the moat so far that we can't jump with you.
Oh, man.
So now, how do you see that WrestleMania going? Do you have Ken Shamrock winning at WrestleMania 2000, or do you want to push it back a little bit further? You want like a King of the Ring, SummerSlam portion of the year, or Survivor Series type?
I'm thinking SummerSlam. So I'm thinking like you have Triple H stay the champ, but now you establish Ken Shamrock as his muscle.
Okay.
So you still get the spring of Triple H. with McMahon pushing him and backing him. But now you got the hired muscle, Ken Shamrock, where he can have matches on his own and just decimate people. Like, keep making him look tougher, but have Triple H be that heel that relies on his muscle to come through. Because you look like he wins at WrestleMania, he wins at Backlash, and then you can easily have him help Triple H in that triple threat match against with Rock and Shane at Insurrection. I mean, that was in UK, so who really cares about that? But I say you keep the belt on Triple H. You even have him help out in the 60-man Iron Man match. You know what I mean? And at Judgment Day, like, you keep building this, like, keep building him up to be that corporate monster, and then you got the huge payoff coming. Because King of the Ring, he can be on Triple H's team, the McMahon-Helmsley faction. For the love of God, please take Mr. McMahon out of that and put in Ken Shamrock. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love that. Like, I really like the idea of, and just the wheels start turning as you're talking, is that you get that hired muscle. And then at some point, I can almost picture it being, the check didn't clear.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. I love that.
Like, maybe there's a little financial trouble. Like, maybe a Shane McMahon has been pilfering funds or diverting funds from Mr. McMahon. And so the check doesn't clear. And it's like he turns on Mr. McMahon because he's just a hired gun. It's whoever pays him. Your check didn't clear. And then you have kind of like this weird feud where Mr. McMahon, where Shane McMahon, I just picture Shane being the guy that did it.
Oh yeah. He's going to have to take some bumps from Ken Shamrock. For
right.
Sure.
And so I just see that, like, taking the money and running type of thing. Then you got kind of a storyline there.
Yeah.
An embezzlement type of thing. Shane McMahon embezzles the funds, and now Shamrock is now a loose cannon. He's not getting paid by Mr. McMahon, so he's not with Mr. McMahon. Maybe Shane McMahon's not paying him either. Yeah. So it's like now in order for me to get paid, what's the only thing that makes me money? Championships.
Yeah, there you go.
That prize fighter you were talking about again. The only way to make money here is to have gold around your waist. So now I'm coming for your guy.
I like that, because you can lay the roots at King of the Ring with that faction. Like, have him find out the funds don't clear midway through the match and him abandon Triple H and Shane. You know what I mean? Leave them high and dry.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I like that. Just finding out the funds didn't clear. And I don't know how exactly we do it, because we're talking 2000. So it's not like he gets a chase alert on his phone.
You got to have some poor smuck from the back come out and be the messenger. You know
who I picture for this? And I don't know why, because I don't think he was with the company at this time. JJ Dillon. I picture JJ Dillon with a Halliburton coming out. For some reason, he keeps the bank statements in a Halliburton.
They're playing you, son.
Yeah, they're playing you, son. And telling him, like, he's been his business manager this whole time. And
I don't know why I was picturing, because I don't think he was with the company either. Harvey Winkle.
Oh yeah, Harvey Whippleman.
There we go.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, he's one of those guys where any of those guys where they were heel managers.
Yeah,
could kind of play that part.
Perfect.
And
so, Ted DiBiase comes out as $1 million.
He comes out with, but then he has to have a reason why he's not paying him. You're the $1 million man. You got all this money. It's like, well, I could pay you in rhinestones or a sequined suit with dollar signs on it. Doesn't that say rich to everyone?
We can get IRS to have your back.
Yes, which it just occurred to me, and maybe this is something that we've all known. The $1 Million Man wore probably the cheapest suit from Party City. And we go, that's what a rich guy looks like.
That's so rich.
Right. Whereas Ric Flair was actually wearing expensive suits and should have been the $1 Million Man coming out. Why didn't they just copy Ric Flair's look? Why didn't Ted DiBiase just look like Ric Flair instead of looking like a cartoon version of Money? He looked like Richie Rich.
Thinking about how terrible his suits were back then. You're right. That is so bad.
Yeah. So we've already got Ken Shamrock a whole nother year beyond what he had before. He's
because he got to recharge. He got to
recharge.
He saw the fam. He's good.
Right. And I don't even think that we need, from this point on, it's like who won the actual titles at this point is almost inconsequential because we've got, Ken Shamrock in the mix. So the people that are going to be in the mix with us in that title picture are obviously Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Mick Foley, and Triple H.
Yeah.
And Big Show, I think Big Show can also be part of that mix, but definitely we now have the emergence of Kurt Angle as a top guy.
And don't you just lick your chomps or just salivate at the thought of a dangerous Ken Shamrock built up over the last year and a half versus Kurt Angle.
Yes, absolutely. Because you have now two different worlds of fighting and two ankle locks here.
Yes. Yeah.
You kind of both have submission moves, and Kurt Angle. I mean, I don't know amateur wrestling super well, but Kurt Angle was kind of doing more of an MMA move there. He wasn't doing, I don't think people do, maybe they do those ankle locks in amateur wrestling, but it feels more like an MMA fighting thing. So the ankle lock versus ankle lock, Ken Shamrock got that belt. Kurt Angle's coming for it type of thing. Ankle lock versus ankle lock, and that I like that idea. Now, what WWE probably would end up doing, because you've got that, it would be a no submissions match, and you have to pin them or knock them out.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like a no pin version, maybe.
Yeah. That straight submission only.
Submission only. And
take it off the table.
Take it off the table. I'm actually okay with a cage involved with those two. Maybe not the first match. Maybe we have
the
payoff match here, but you put these two guys in a cage, and that feels real. That feels like it's not just paralleling MMA. It's blurring the lines between MMA and WWE, which they tried to do on multiple occasions, even as close as, the pit fighting thing that they were doing, after hours, dark type stuff.
Yeah.
Where they're both believable fighters. They're both believable, and Kurt Angle probably, if he was 10 years younger, probably would have gone to UFC at some point.
I agree.
He had that, wrestling ability, which is a martial art in of itself, to actually have probably put up a good fight in there. And so in a cage, and I like the idea because when we grew up, and I've heard, I think Jim Ross talk about this, is it's the opposite psychology of what you really want for a cage match, which is the winner runs away.
Right.
So this one is, there is no running away. Maybe a Hell in a Cell. The whole thing's locked. There's a lid on it.
Can't get out.
The only way out of this cage is to be dragged out. After you've been, submitted or beaten to a pulp so much that the only way out is a referee, stopping the match. I think that could have been an amazing match. And I think I would say that would be a great WrestleMania, because they have the Hell in the Cell type of pay-per-view, but the WrestleMania 17 or X7,
X7,
as many people, I've never met anybody that actually says that. Right. Like X7. This is part of the early 2000s that I hope our children forget, is that we were doing stuff like this. X7, that Mountain Dew was turning to Extreme, and all of this stuff where
everything was extreme.
Everything was extreme, and everything's spelled wrong. Everything's with an X at the beginning because the X Games were so popular. So now,
so big.
And I bet you, it never occurred to me, but I bet the X7 was not to have just a Roman numeral, but to make it seem like it's extreme.
Yeah.
So that one we know is headlined by Stone Cold, The Rock. Well, that's great because these guys don't need to be involved in that at all.
Not at all.
They don't need to be, because Kurt Angle actually went up against Chris Benoit, who's a believable guy in himself, but unnecessary Just a Hell in the Cell match at WrestleMania.
Because the Rock and Stone Cold don't need the belt. You know what I mean? They're already the Rock and Stone Cold.
Absolutely. And this is already a great pay-per-view. But just think to allow them having that time, because Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit was already a 14-minute match. Mm-hmm. So, man, you could have them going toe to toe that whole time. And you can move Chris Benoit around a little bit where he doesn't have to, there's like a gimmick battle royal in this that lasts like 3 minutes. That's completely unnecessary in this whole thing. But you've got like Chris Jericho versus William Regal. And I almost think you could make that Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit, move that around. So now you've got a much more interesting match there, because, I still remember the Steven Regal TV champion. He's not the guy that is ever going to be your WWE champion. Really.
Right. No, I agree.
So you're kind of opening the pay-per-view with that Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. And then in the middle of this whole WrestleMania, Kurt Angle, Ken Shamrock to the death.
Love it.
It's going to be a hard match to follow.
Because what would be great is you have them beat the absolute crap out of each other. Mm-hmm. So much so that at the end you get that touch of respect from each other. And wouldn't you just love, because the whole rest of 2001 is the 2-man power trip. Mm-hmm. Wouldn't a newly formed alliance between Ken Shamrock and Kurt Angle be the perfect foils for them?
Oh, I love it. I think that would be great, because these guys are tough. Maybe they've earned so much respect for each other in that ring that there's no other place to go besides join forces. And I feel like they flirted with this before, but even for making a faction of these guys that, I think with Kurt Angle, they've flirted with him having wrestler stable.
Yeah. But
MMA wrestling, I feel like right around this time, we're starting to, this is still 2001, but I think if you're spending the rest of, 2001 with the two of them together, we're so close to the introduction of Brock Lesnar.
Right.
That it's something where you almost could have him be the protege that, they've wreaked havoc for a year together. Now they've got a new protege kind of combined of both their worlds, the wrestling and the MMA, to create, and this is before Brock was in MMA, but I think that it would work because he's believable and we know where it goes. That you're creating, it's almost like their version of them combined as Dr. Frankenstein. They're creating this monster and
putting both of their knowledge into it.
Yeah, exactly. They're forming into this one person. And then obviously I think that you have a storyline of him turning on both of them.
Oh, easily. And then you build him up to be the next huge monster.
Right. And to me, this almost feels like, because that puts Ken Shamrock into 2002, 2003. I feel like that is almost the longest amount of time you're going to really benefit from Ken Shamrock. You've dealt with him as being a monster. Really, the only thing that's going to happen from there is he's going to start going down the card.
Right. Because, you don't need him in the ruthless aggression. Like when you're starting to make that transition into that new era, you don't need a Ken Shamrock.
Yeah, he's just, ruthless aggression is certainly in the PG era. That character doesn't fit. Also, I think around 2003 is when, I think it was around 2003, maybe it was 2004, but Stone Cold is now gone.
Yep.
So Stone Cold's gone. The Rock is essentially gone. Kurt Angle's going to be gone very soon because, you know, he ends up going off to TNA. He's got substance abuse issues anyway to begin with that I think that he was dealing with. Ken Shamrock would be kind of the guy left over. And so I don't see him being the guy that's left over. I see it his last year of that Brock Lesnar, you know, instead of Brock Lesnar being brought in by Heyman, he's kind of brought in by these guys and then maybe stolen by Heyman to turn
I like
on.
That. I like that a lot.
And I think after that, I think Brock Lesnar beating Ken Shamrock is the last we see of him.
But I think if he leaves on good terms like that, you can bring him in for a spot here and there, as opposed to him returning to, you know, God knows what he's done in TNA here and there. You know what I mean? Like let those few short little bursts of runs be in the WWE instead, because he was able to leave on good terms instead of tragically in 1999.
Absolutely. So I don't know about you, but I'm happy with this because it probably gets him in the Hall of Fame too. So we probably see a Hall of Fame induction of Ken Shamrock somewhere in the mid-aughts.
Yeah, because I mean, a dominant run of 4 years.
Yeah.
Pretty solid.
Exactly. So, well, it took us, you know, a little over an hour to get there, but we now got Ken Shamrock in the Hall of Fame. That's what we just did. We just changed that career into Hall of Fame credentials. There's some fun stuff in there because he was almost ahead of his time.
He was, because they unfortunately did get it right. You know what I mean?
Yes.
With Brock Lesnar.
Yes, they did. Well, as short as that was too, you know, that's the thing about some of these tough guys, these real legitimate guys, especially in today's era, is that maybe they just can't last as long. Yeah. You know, maybe they want to go off and do other things and
the mind starts wandering.
Yeah. They go, you know, this is fun, but you know, I actually could fight. And UFC is really kind of an alternate promotion. And so it exists and money can be made there. And you actually probably don't put your body through as much as you do in the WWE. You probably get beat up less.
Because I was looking at it and it looks like, you know, he had a pretty. I would like to dig deeper into that to see. It looks like he had a neck injury that they recommended not wrestling anymore, but still let him fight. So that's interesting to me. You know what I mean? Like, no pro wrestling where the guy is trying not to hurt you, but get in there and get knocked out. You know, like.
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, I would love to have never had to seen him fight in MMA again because it just tarnished.
It just went downhill. So that's why he could have had I feel like an extended run, hopefully in WWE, making money as one of the top guys for an extended year and a half. Maybe he doesn't have to do all that.
Absolutely. Well, we got him in the Hall of Fame.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished. Drew, thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
It was so much fun. And all of you listeners, you can follow him on Twitter at Harrison_comedy. Drew, we'll have to do this again sometime. Thank you.
Please, man. I love it. Love talking wrestling.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. Do you agree with our booking? Would you do it differently? Well, I'm at Comedian Luke on all social media platforms, and you can actually at RebookingTT on Twitter and Rebooking the Territory on Facebook. You can also find out about future episodes there. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and please give us a 5-star review. It truly helps.